The championship hung in the balance as Thunder, seconds away from victory, froze completely in the center of the arena, his powerful muscles locked in defiance of Mason's urgent commands. Every eye in the stunned arena followed the horse's fixed gaze toward the shadowy eastern entrance, where something had triggered a protective instinct more powerful than years of training or the glory of winning. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the dusty arena of the Cedar Creek Rodeo grounds. Mason Riley wiped the sweat from his brow as he adjusted the saddle on Thunder, his trusted quarter horse of 7 years. The animal's coat gleamed a deep chestnut in the golden light, muscles rippling beneath as Thunder shifted his weight from one hoof to another. This wasn't just any rodeo, it was the national finals, the culmination of years of hard work, early mornings, and countless miles on the road. "Easy, boy," Mason whispered, running a calloused hand down Thunder's neck. The horse's ears flicked back, listening to his rider's voice with the familiarity that comes from thousands of hours spent together. In the background, the announcer's voice boomed through crackling speakers, introducing the next competitor in the barrel racing event. Mason and Thunder were scheduled to compete in the final round of reining, a discipline that showcased the extraordinary bond between horse and rider through a series of precise, controlled movements. They had qualified with the highest score in the preliminaries, making them the favorites to win. For Mason, a 32-year-old former ranch hand from Montana, this championship meant everything: recognition, financial security, and validation of the faith he had placed in Thunder when others had written the horse off. "You ready to show them what we've got?" Mason asked, his voice barely audible over the cheers erupting from the stands. Thunder nickered softly in response, a sound that Mason had come to interpret as agreement over their years together. 7 years earlier, Mason had found Thunder at a livestock auction, a 3-year-old with a rebellious streak that had made him undesirable to most buyers. The previous owner, a wealthy businessman with little patience and less experience, had purchased Thunder as a status symbol, only to discard him when the horse proved too spirited to be easily controlled. When Mason first saw Thunder in the auction pen, something in the horse's defiant stance and intelligent eyes spoke to him. Despite having barely enough money saved for a down payment on a truck, Mason spent every cent on the unwanted horse. "People thought I was crazy," Mason often told anyone who would listen. "But I saw something in him that day, something special." The road to the finals hadn't been easy. There were countless moments when Mason questioned his decision, particularly in those early days when Thunder seemed determined to unseat him at every opportunity. There were bruises, falls, and frustrated tears shed in the privacy of the barn. But there were also breakthroughs, moments when Thunder's resistance melted away, replaced by a willingness to work with Mason rather than against him. As they waited for their turn, Mason caught sight of his coach, Eleanor Winters, moving purposefully toward them through the crowd. At 62, Eleanor had the weathered face of someone who had spent a lifetime under the sun and the sharp eyes of a woman who missed nothing. She had been a champion in her day, and now she shared her knowledge with a select few riders she deemed worthy of her time. "How's he feeling?" Eleanor asked, her gaze assessing Thunder with professional scrutiny. "Ready?" Mason replied with a confidence he didn't entirely feel. The stakes had never been higher, and despite Thunder's calm exterior, Mason could sense a subtle tension in the horse's body. "A bit keyed up, maybe." Eleanor nodded, reaching out to run experienced hands down Thunder's legs, checking for any signs of heat or swelling. "That's to be expected. Just remember what we talked about. Stay centered, keep your cues clear, and trust him. He knows what to do." Mason nodded, grateful for Eleanor's steady presence. When he had first approached her 3 years ago, she had turned him away, unimpressed by his amateur status. It was only after she witnessed Thunder's potential during a local competition that she agreed to work with them. Under her guidance, they had transformed from a promising pair to serious contenders. The announcer's voice cut through the ambient noise. Next up in the reigning finals, riding Thunder's redemption, Mason Riley from Pinewood, Montana. The moment had arrived. Mason took a deep breath, centering himself as Eleanor had taught him. He mounted Thunder with practiced ease, feeling the horse shift beneath him, adjusting to his weight. With a gentle squeeze of his legs, they moved forward toward the entrance of the arena. "Remember," Eleanor called after them, "you two are already champions in my book." The crowd's applause washed over them as they entered the arena, but Mason barely heard it. His world had narrowed to the feel of Thunder beneath him, the pattern they were about to perform etched in both their minds. The routine began flawlessly, Thunder responding to the lightest touch as they executed a series of circles varying from large and fast to small and slow, demonstrating control and precision. The crowd faded further into the background as Mason focused entirely on Thunder, on the subtle shifts in the horse's body that told him Thunder was with him every step of the way. They moved as one entity, years of training and trust evident in every stride. When it came time for the sliding stop, a move where Thunder would sprint forward at full gallop before planting his hind legs and sliding to a dramatic halt, Mason felt a familiar surge of confidence. Thunder gathered himself, power building in his hindquarters as they thundered down the center of the arena. The audience held their collective breath, knowing this was the most spectacular element of their routine. Mason gave the signal, and Thunder dug his hind hooves into the dirt, forelegs continuing their motion as they slid forward in a perfect stop that sent dirt flying. The crowd erupted in cheers, but Mason didn't let it break his concentration. 3 spins to the right followed, Thunder pivoting on his hind leg with balletic precision. Then, as they prepared for the final element of their routine, a series of flying lead changes where Thunder would switch the leading leg at each stride while maintaining a canter, Mason sensed a subtle change in the horse beneath him. Thunder's ears, which had been attentively focused forward, suddenly swiveled back and forth. His stride, which had been fluid and confident, became hesitant. As they approached the center of the arena for the final sequence, Thunder abruptly slowed his pace. "Come on, boy," Mason urged quietly, applying gentle pressure with his legs. But instead of responding as he had thousands of times before, Thunder came to a complete stop in the middle of the arena. The crowd's cheers faded into confused murmurs. Mason, bewildered by this unprecedented behavior, tried again with a slightly firmer cue. Thunder remained motionless, his body rigid beneath the saddle. Mason's heart began to race, the possibility of disqualification looming large in his mind. Years of work, thousands of miles traveled, countless hours of training, all potentially undone in this moment of inexplicable rebellion. "What's wrong?" Mason whispered, bending low over Thunder's neck. The horse's ears continued to flick back and forth, his eyes fixed on something in the distance. Following Thunder's gaze, Mason peered toward the far side of the arena, but in the glare of the afternoon sun, he couldn't immediately discern what had captured his horse's attention. In the stands, confusion gave way to restlessness. The announcer's voice came over the speakers. "Folks, it seems we're experiencing a slight delay with Mason Riley and Thunder's redemption." Mason knew they were running out of time. In desperation, he glanced toward Eleanor at the edge of the arena, seeking guidance. Her expression was puzzled, but she gestured for him to remain calm. As Mason turned back to the enigma before him, a chill ran down his spine. What had Thunder seen that Mason couldn't? What force was powerful enough to halt a championship horse in his tracks during the most important performance of his life? The silence in the arena seemed to stretch for an eternity as Mason sat atop his motionless horse. Seconds ticked by like hours, each one pushing them closer to disqualification. The confused murmurs from the crowd grew louder, and Mason could feel the weight of thousands of eyes on him. His dreams of championship glory were slipping away with each passing moment. "Come on, Thunder," Mason pleaded, his voice barely above a whisper. "We're so close." But Thunder remained frozen, his entire body alert and tense. The horse's nostrils flared, taking in deep breaths, as if scenting something in the air that human senses couldn't detect. His ears remained forward, locked onto something near the eastern entrance to the arena. Mason squinted against the sun's glare, following Thunder's unwavering gaze. At first he saw nothing unusual, just the standard setup of barriers, gates, and event staff moving about their business. Then, as a cloud momentarily dimmed the harsh sunlight, Mason noticed movement in the shadows beneath the stands. A small form darted between the support beams so quickly that Mason almost missed it. Thunder's muscles tensed further beneath him. Whatever the horse had detected, it was there, in that shadowy space where the arena's bright lights didn't reach. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer's voice boomed through the speakers, an edge of uncertainty clear in his tone. "It appears we're having some unexpected delays with our final competitor. The judges will be making a decision regarding—" The announcement was cut short by a sudden commotion near the eastern entrance. Several staff members were rushing toward the area Thunder had been fixated on. Mason strained to see what was happening, but from his position in the center of the arena, details were difficult to make out. Eleanor appeared at the edge of the arena, her face etched with concern. She caught Mason's eye and pointed urgently toward the exit. The message was clear: get Thunder out of the arena now. But Thunder wouldn't budge. Even as Mason applied pressure with his legs and shifted his weight forward, signals that had never failed to move the horse before, Thunder remained rooted to the spot, his attention unbreakable. Then, without warning, Thunder let out a loud, urgent whinny that echoed through the arena. The sound silenced the crowd instantaneously. It wasn't a sound of fear or aggression, but something else entirely, almost like a call. To everyone's astonishment, a response came from the direction Thunder was facing. A high-pitched, frightened whinny echoed back, and suddenly the mystery began to unravel before their eyes. From beneath the eastern stands, a small foal emerged, its coat a dusty brown, legs spindly and trembling. It couldn't have been more than a few months old. The foal took several unsteady steps into the arena, clearly terrified by the lights and the crowd. It froze momentarily, overwhelmed by the open space and the thousands of spectators. The arena fell into complete silence as understanding dawned collectively. Thunder hadn't been being stubborn or difficult. He had sensed the presence of the foal, alone and afraid, somehow separated from its mother and lost in the unfamiliar and frightening environment of the rodeo grounds. A foal, Mason breathed, the realization washing over him. "You knew it was there all along, didn't you, boy?" Thunder's ears flicked back at the sound of Mason's voice, but his attention remained fixed on the frightened young horse. The foal took another tentative step forward, then stopped again, clearly unsure which way to go. Staff members approached cautiously, but their presence only seemed to increase the foal's distress. Mason felt Thunder's body shift beneath him, the muscles bunching with restrained energy. Years of working together had taught Mason to read these signals. Thunder wanted to move, but he was waiting for permission. In that moment, Mason made a decision that would change everything. The championship, the prize money, the recognition he'd worked years for, all of it faded in importance compared to what was happening right now. With a soft click of his tongue, he gave Thunder the signal to proceed at his own pace. Thunder moved forward with surprising gentleness, approaching the frightened foal with slow, deliberate steps. The crowd watched in stunned silence as the powerful reining horse, just minutes earlier, executing precise athletic maneuvers, now moved with the care and patience of a seasoned mare approaching her own offspring. When they were about 20 feet from the foal, Thunder stopped and lowered his head slightly. The gesture seemed to calm the youngster, who responded with another small whinny. The foal's trembling lessened as it regarded the larger horse with cautious interest. "Easy," Mason murmured, though whether to Thunder or the foal he wasn't sure. He remained perfectly still in the saddle, allowing Thunder to take the lead in this unexpected situation. Thunder nickered softly, a gentle, reassuring sound that Mason had rarely heard him make. The foal's ears perked up at the sound, and to everyone's amazement it took several steps toward them, its fear seemingly diminished by Thunder's presence. The announcer, who had been silent during this unexpected development, finally found his voice. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his tone hushed with wonder, "I've been announcing rodeo events for 27 years, and I have never seen anything like this." As the drama unfolded in the arena, staff members had been frantically searching for information about the foal. A woman in a rodeo operations jacket approached Eleanor at the sidelines, gesturing urgently as she explained something. Eleanor's expression shifted from concern to understanding, and she nodded firmly before turning toward the arena. "Mason," she called out, her voice carrying across the now quiet space. "That foal belongs to Midnight Star. She's one of the stock contractor's mares. They got separated during transport. The mare is frantic in the holding pens." This information presented a new challenge. The foal needed to be reunited with its mother, but attempting to catch a frightened young horse in front of thousands of spectators could end badly for everyone involved. Mason looked down at Thunder, who remained focused on the foal, and made another decision. Carefully, he dismounted, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. The crowd gasped. A competitor leaving their horse during a championship run was unprecedented, but this had long since ceased to be a normal competition. With the reins loosely in his hand, Mason stood beside Thunder, trusting his horse completely. "What do you think, boy? Can we help this little one find its mama?" Thunder shifted his weight slightly, his body language relaxed but attentive. The foal, seeing Mason on the ground, took a hesitant step backward, but Thunder immediately nickered again, the sound somehow reassuring. Mason stood quietly, letting Thunder do what instinct was clearly driving him to do. The championship horse took another step forward, then another, gradually closing the distance to the foal. The young horse trembled but didn't flee, its eyes fixed on Thunder as if recognizing something trustworthy in the older horse. The entire arena held its breath as Thunder finally reached the foal. With infinite gentleness, he stretched out his neck and touched his nose to the youngster's muzzle. The foal flinched slightly, but then stood still, allowing the contact. "I don't believe what I'm seeing," the announcer whispered into his microphone, his professional detachment momentarily forgotten. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are witnessing something extraordinary today." In that moment, as Thunder stood protectively beside the frightened foal, Mason understood with perfect clarity why his horse had refused to complete their championship run. Some things were simply more important than ribbons and trophies. Some instincts ran deeper than training. And sometimes the true measure of a champion had nothing to do with scores or prizes. With Thunder standing protectively beside the foal, Mason took a deep breath and considered their next move. The crowd remained eerily silent, thousands of spectators leaning forward in their seats, captivated by the unfolding drama. Even the judges, who should have been concerned with rules and disqualifications, seemed too entranced by the scene to intervene. "We need to get them both out of the arena," Eleanor called from the sidelines, her practical nature asserting itself through the emotion of the moment. "The mare is in the east holding pen. She's going to break down the barriers if she doesn't see her baby soon." Mason nodded, acknowledging the urgency of the situation. Midnight Star's distress would only escalate the longer she remained separated from her foal, but moving a frightened young horse through a crowded arena presented significant challenges. One wrong move, One loud noise, and the foal might bolt, potentially injuring itself or others in panic. Keeping his movements deliberate and unhurried, Mason slowly gathered Thunder's reins in his hand. "Think you can help me get this little one back to its mama?" he murmured. Thunder's ears flicked back at the sound of Mason's voice, but his attention remained primarily on the foal, who had begun to relax in the presence of the older horse. The transformation was remarkable. The young horse's trembling had subsided, replaced by a tentative curiosity. Mason glanced toward the eastern exit, mapping the path they would need to take. It was about 100 yards away, across open arena space with thousands of onlookers. Under normal circumstances, leading a trained horse that distance would be trivial, but these were far from normal circumstances. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer's voice came softly over the speakers. "Understanding the delicacy of the moment, we ask that you please remain quiet as our competitor attempts to assist in reuniting this foal with its mother." A respectful hush fell over the already quiet arena. Mason nodded gratefully toward the announcer's booth, then turned his attention back to the task at hand. With Thunder's reins in his left hand, he slowly reached toward the foal with his right. The young horse shied away slightly, but Thunder stepped forward, positioning himself so that the foal was between him and Mason, not trapped, but sheltered. It was such a deliberate movement that several gasps of amazement rippled through the crowd. "Smart boy," Mason whispered, a surge of pride warming his chest. The bond he shared with Thunder had always been special, but watching his horse's intelligence and compassion in action stirred something even deeper. With Thunder providing a sense of security, the foal allowed Mason to gently touch its neck. The young horse flinched but didn't pull away. Mason stroked it slowly, murmuring reassurances. He had no lead rope for the foal, no halter, just his hands, his voice, and Thunder's steadying presence. "Let's try something," Mason said quietly, mostly to himself. He began to walk forward, leading Thunder, who in turn stayed close to the foal. The young horse hesitated, then, remarkably, began to follow Thunder, drawn by some instinctive trust in the older horse. Step by careful step, they began their journey across the arena. The foal stayed close to Thunder's flank, occasionally brushing against him as if drawing courage from the contact. Thunder matched his pace to the youngsters, slowing when it hesitated, pausing when it seemed unsure. From the stands, a child's voice carried clearly in the hushed arena. "Look, Mommy, the big horse is helping the baby." The simple observation brought smiles to many faces, the innocence of the comment capturing exactly what was unfolding before them. This wasn't a competition anymore. It was a rescue, a demonstration of something pure and instinctive that transcended the structured world of rodeo scoring and championship titles. As they neared the halfway point of their journey, a commotion erupted from the direction of the eastern pens. The desperate whinny of a mare echoed through the arena. Midnight Star had heard or sensed her foal's presence. The foal's head shot up, ears pricked forward at the sound of its mother's call. What happened next tested Mason's horsemanship to its limits. The foal, suddenly energized by its mother's voice, darted forward, no longer content with the slow, careful pace. Thunder immediately tensed, looking to Mason for guidance. "Stay with it," Mason commanded, giving Thunder more rein. The experienced horse understood, lengthening his stride to keep pace with the foal, who was now trotting eagerly toward the sound of its mother. Mason jogged alongside, ready to intervene if the foal veered off course or showed signs of panic, but Thunder was handling the situation with remarkable skill. He kept himself positioned slightly behind and to the side of the young horse, herding it gently toward the exit. The arena staff had anticipated their approach and opened the gates wide. Beyond, in the holding area, Midnight Star was visible now, a sleek black mare with a white star on her forehead, straining against the barriers of her pen, eyes wild with maternal concern. As they approached the exit, Mason felt a tug on Thunder's reins. He looked back to see Eleanor keeping pace with them, her expression a mixture of amazement and professional assessment. "I've never seen anything like this," she said, slightly breathless. "He's herding that foal like a cutting horse would move a calf." Mason nodded, too focused on the task to respond verbally. They were almost there, just a few more yards to the exit. The foal, hearing its mother's increasingly frantic calls, broke into a clumsy gallop. Thunder immediately increased his speed, staying with the youngster. As they passed through the gate and into the holding area, staff members rushed to close off escape routes, creating a clear path to Midnight Star's pen. The mare was practically climbing the panels now, her maternal instinct overwhelming any training or restraint. The foal, seeing its mother, let out a high-pitched whinny and broke into a full run. Thunder pulled against the reins, clearly wanting to follow, but Mason held him back. "Your job's done, boy," he said softly, bringing Thunder to a halt as they watched the foal race the final distance to its mother. Staff members quickly opened Midnight Star's pen, and the reunion that followed brought tears to many eyes. The mare enveloped her foal with her body, nickering softly as she checked it over from head to tail, assuring herself that her baby was unharmed. The foal pressed against its mother's side, finally safe after its frightening adventure. Mason patted Thunder's neck, feeling the horse's muscles still tense beneath his hand. "You did good, boy. Real good." As the immediate drama concluded, reality began to seep back in. Mason became aware of the crowd again, of the competition they had abandoned, of the judges who were now conferring urgently among themselves. He turned Thunder back toward the main arena, where their unfinished routine and uncertain fate awaited them. Eleanor met them at the gate, her face unreadable. "The judges want to speak with you," she said simply. Mason nodded, his throat suddenly dry. The euphoria of the successful rescue was fading, replaced by the sobering realization of what his decision might cost him professionally. Championships at this level didn't come along often, and he had effectively forfeited their chance. As they re-entered the arena, an unexpected sound greeted them. Applause. It started slowly, but quickly swelled to fill the entire space, thousands of spectators rising to their feet in a standing ovation. The crowd, hardened rodeo fans, competitors, judges, and casual observers alike, were united in their appreciation of what they had witnessed. Thunder's ears swiveled at the sound, and Mason felt the horse relax beneath him, as if understanding that despite abandoning their routine, they had accomplished something far more meaningful. Mason patted his neck again, words inadequate to express his gratitude and pride. "Mason Riley," the announcer's voice boomed over the speakers, "the judges would like you to report to the center of the arena." With a deep breath, Mason guided Thunder forward, ready to face whatever decision had been made. Whether it ended in disqualification or not, he knew he wouldn't change a thing about how they had responded to that frightened foal. Some things were simply more important than winning. The center of the arena had never felt so vast or exposed. Mason guided Thunder toward the judging panel, acutely aware of the thousands of eyes following their every move. The applause gradually faded into an expectant hush as they approached the 5 judges who sat behind a long table, their faces impassive and professional. Thunder walked with a quiet dignity, his hooves barely making a sound on the soft dirt. Despite the interrupted routine and the emotional roller coaster of the past half hour, the horse carried himself with the same poise he'd shown since entering the arena. If anything, there was a new quality to his bearing, a subtle pride that hadn't been there before. The head judge, Harriet Blackwood, a legendary figure in the reining world with 30 years of experience, rose from her seat as they approached. Her silver hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and her weathered face gave nothing away as she stepped forward to meet them. "Mr. Riley," she began, her voice carrying across the now silent arena. In my decades of judging reining competitions, I have never witnessed anything quite like what we've all seen today. Mason swallowed hard, preparing himself for the inevitable disqualification. He had, after all, abandoned their routine midway and dismounted in the arena, both clear violations of competition rules. The rulebook is quite specific about the requirements for completing a reining pattern, Harriet continued, gesturing to the thick binder that lay open on the judge's table. And by those written standards, your performance today was technically incomplete. A murmur rippled through the crowd, a collective sound of disappointment and disagreement. Mason nodded solemnly, accepting the verdict without protest. He had known the consequences when he made his choice. But Harriet wasn't finished. However, she said, raising her hand slightly to quiet the murmuring audience, the rule book also grants the judges discretionary power in extraordinary circumstances. She turned to look at her fellow judges, who all nodded in solemn agreement before she continued. What we witnessed today transcended the typical boundaries of our sport. Your horse demonstrated an awareness and compassion that speaks to the very essence of what makes these animals so extraordinary. And you, Mr. Riley, showed us that sometimes the true measure of horsemanship lies not in the perfect execution of a rehearsed pattern, but in the ability to trust your horse's instincts when something more important is at stake. Mason felt a lump forming in his throat. Thunder shifted beneath him, as if sensing the emotional weight of the moment. The judges have conferred, Harriet announced, her voice strengthening, and we have come to a unanimous decision. The entire arena seemed to hold its breath. Mason found himself unconsciously holding the reins a little tighter, his knuckles whitening with tension. While we cannot award you points for an incomplete routine under the technical scoring system, Harriet explained, we are invoking the special recognition clause of the rulebook to award you and Thunder's Redemption the Exceptional Merit Award, an honor that has only been bestowed twice in the history of this competition. The arena erupted in cheers. Mason sat stunned in the saddle, struggling to process what he had just heard. The Exceptional Merit Award was almost mythical in rodeo circles, a special recognition reserved for moments that exemplified the highest ideals of the sport in ways that transcended normal competition. Additionally, Harriet continued once the cheers had subsided enough for her to be heard, the committee has decided that you will be offered the opportunity to complete your routine in a special exhibition run following the conclusion of today's competition, should you choose to do so. Mason felt a smile break across his face as he leaned forward to pat Thunder's neck. What do you think, boy? Got another run in you today? Thunder's ears flicked back at the sound of his voice, and the horse gave a small, eager shake of his head that drew appreciative laughter from the crowd. I think that's a yes, ma'am, Mason replied, his voice thick with emotion. We'd be honored. Harriet smiled, a rare crack in her professional demeanor. Then it settled, and Mr. Riley, she added, stepping closer and lowering her voice so that only he could hear, off the record, what your horse did today, what you both did, that's why many of us got into this business in the first place, to witness that kind of connection between human and horse. Thank you for reminding us. As Mason and Thunder made their way back toward the exit, the applause resumed, a rolling wave of appreciation that followed them across the arena. Eleanor waited for them at the gate, tears glistening in her eyes despite her attempts to maintain her usual stoic demeanor. You old softy, Mason teased as they approached. Eleanor snorted, quickly wiping her eyes. Don't you start. I've got a reputation to maintain. But her attempt at gruffness couldn't mask the pride in her voice. You two were something else out there. It was all Thunder, Mason replied, dismounting and loosening the cinch on Thunder's saddle to give him some relief before their exhibition run. I just followed his lead. That's what makes you a good horseman. Eleanor said simply, knowing when to lead and when to follow. As they walked toward the warm-up area to prepare for their exhibition, they were intercepted by a man in a stock contractor's jacket, heavy-set, with a thick mustache and kind eyes. He extended his hand to Mason. "Name's Frank Delgado," he introduced himself. "I own Midnight Star and her foal. I wanted to thank you personally for what you did out there." Mason shook his hand firmly. "No thanks needed. Thunder's the one who noticed something was wrong." Frank nodded, looking at Thunder with newfound respect. "That's some horse you've got. The foal, we call him Stargazer. He got spooked during unloading and slipped away from my handler. Been searching for him for over an hour. If your horse hadn't spotted him..." He left the sentence unfinished, but the implication was clear. In the chaos of a rodeo grounds, a loose foal could easily have been injured or worse. "Is the little guy okay?" Mason asked. "Right as rain," Frank assured him. "Back with his mama and settling down nicely. Doc checked him over, not a scratch on him." He hesitated, then added, "Listen, I breed quarter horses, good ones. Midnight Star comes from champion lines. When Stargazer is weaned, I'd like to offer you first refusal if you're interested." The offer took Mason by surprise. Frank Delgado's horses were well known in rodeo circles, expensive, top-quality stock that rarely changed hands outside of elite buyers. "That's mighty generous," Mason replied, genuinely touched. "But I'm not sure I could afford..." Frank waved his hand dismissively. "We can work something out. After what I saw today, I'd sleep better knowing that Colt would be in good hands, hands that understand what really matters when it comes to horses." He glanced at Thunder with appreciation. "Besides, something tells me he and your boy here would get along just fine." As Frank walked away, Eleanor raised an eyebrow at Mason. "Not a bad day's work. You entered a reining competition and might walk away with a promising young colt." Mason smiled, running his hand along Thunder's strong neck. "Funny how things work out sometimes." They continued toward the warm-up area, where they would prepare for their exhibition run. But regardless of how that performance went, Mason knew that today had already become one of the most significant of his career, not because of any award or recognition, but because he had seen Thunder's true character revealed in a moment of unexpected challenge. Some horses performed well in the show ring because they were trained to do so, but horses like Thunder, horses that recognized when something more important than ribbons and applause was at stake, those were the rare ones, the partners that changed not just careers but lives. The warm-up area buzzed with activity as riders prepared for their events, but a respectful space had formed around Mason and Thunder. Word of what had happened in the arena had spread quickly, and competitors who would normally be focused solely on their own preparations paused to offer nods of appreciation or quiet words of respect as they passed by. Mason worked methodically to prepare Thunder for their exhibition run, his movements practiced and precise. He checked the saddle, adjusted the bridle, and ran his hands down each of Thunder's legs, feeling for any signs of strain or fatigue. The horse seemed relaxed but alert, showing no indication that the emotional events of the past hour had drained his energy. "He seems ready," Eleanor observed, leaning against the rail as she watched Mason work. "But are you?" Mason paused, considering the question. The adrenaline of the rescue had begun to fade, leaving him with a mix of emotions he hadn't fully processed yet. There was pride in Thunder's actions, gratitude for the judge's decision, and lingering wonder at the connection he'd witnessed between his horse and the frightened foal, but beneath it all was a subtle undercurrent of uncertainty. Their first attempt at the championship routine had been interrupted in a way no one could have anticipated. Would the second go smoothly, or had the day's events thrown off the delicate balance of focus and timing that reining required? "I think so," he replied, finally straightening up. "It's not about the scores anymore, is it? It's about showing everyone what Thunder can really do when nothing's standing in his way. Eleanor nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. That's the right way to think about it. No pressure, just a chance to showcase what you two have worked for. As they talked, a rodeo official approached with news about their exhibition slot. The schedule had been adjusted to place their run at the very end of the day's events, giving it the prominence of a grand finale. It was an honor that recognized the special nature of what had occurred and the audience's desire to see the conclusion of what they had started. "Looks like we've got about 40 minutes, Mason told Thunder, giving the horse's neck an affectionate pat. "Just enough time to catch our breath and refocus." While Thunder rested, Mason found a quiet corner to sit and gather his thoughts. From this vantage point, he could see across the complex to the holding pens where Midnight Star and her foal were now safely reunited. The mare stood protectively close to her offspring, occasionally nuzzling the young horse as if reassuring herself that he was truly safe. Frank Delgado was nearby, supervising the pair with the careful attention of a responsible owner. The sight brought a smile to Mason's face. In the high-pressure world of competitive rodeo, it was easy to forget sometimes that at its heart, the sport was built around the remarkable bond between humans and horses. Today had been a powerful reminder of that fundamental truth. As the time for their exhibition approached, Mason returned to Thunder's side, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. The nerves that typically accompanied a championship run had been replaced by something different, a quiet confidence built not on the hope of victory, but on the certainty that regardless of what happened in the arena, he and Thunder had already demonstrated something more valuable than perfect technical execution. "It's time," Eleanor announced, checking her watch. "They're announcing you now." Mason mounted Thunder with practiced ease, settling into the familiar saddle. He took a moment to center himself, drawing a deep breath as he gathered the reins in his hands. Eleanor reached up to adjust his hat slightly, a small ritual they had followed before every major competition for the past 3 years. "Remember," she said simply, "just like we practiced, he knows what to do." Mason nodded, feeling Thunder shift beneath him, the horse's energy building as if he understood the significance of what was about to happen. With a gentle squeeze of his legs, Mason guided Thunder toward the arena entrance, where the announcer's voice was already introducing them to the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back to the arena Mason Riley and Thunder's redemption for their special exhibition run." The applause that greeted them as they entered was deafening, a wall of sound that seemed to physically push against them as they rode into the arena. The stands were, if anything, more crowded than before, word having spread about the unusual events and the rare opportunity to witness an exhibition of this nature. Mason guided Thunder to the center of the arena, taking a moment to acknowledge the crowd with a touch to the brim of his hat. Then, as the applause gradually quieted, he positioned Thunder at the starting point for their routine, gathered the reins, and gave the subtle cue to begin. What followed was nothing short of magical. Thunder, seeming to understand the significance of the moment, performed with a level of precision and energy that surpassed even their best practice runs. Each sliding stop sent dirt flying in impressive arcs. Each spin was perfectly centered, Thunder pivoting as if connected to the earth by an invisible axis. The transitions between movements were seamless, horse and rider moving as a single entity through the complex pattern. The crowd watched in appreciative silence, erupting into applause only at the completion of each major element. Even those with little knowledge of reining could recognize that they were witnessing something extraordinary, a performance elevated by the emotional context that surrounded it. As they approached the final sequence, the flying lead changes that they had never reached in their interrupted run, Mason felt Thunder gather himself beneath him, muscles bunching with controlled power. They thundered down the center of the arena, and with perfect timing, Thunder executed the changes, switching his leading leg with each stride, in a display of coordination and athleticism that represented the pinnacle of reining expertise. When the final move was completed, Mason brought Thunder to a halt in the center of the arena, the exact spot where they had stopped earlier to help the foal. The symmetry of the moment was not lost on the audience, who rose to their feet in a thunderous standing ovation. Mason leaned forward, patting Thunder's neck with uninhibited pride. "Perfect," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Absolutely perfect." As they exited the arena to continued applause, Eleanor met them at the gate, her usual reserve completely abandoned as she beamed with pride. "That," she declared, "was the finest reining performance I have ever seen." Coming from Eleanor, whose standards were notoriously exacting, the praise carried special weight. Mason dismounted, loosening Thunder's girth and running up the stirrups with hands that trembled slightly from the lingering adrenaline and emotion. "He was incredible," Mason agreed, unable to keep the wonder from his voice. It's like he knew exactly what this moment meant. As they led Thunder back to the stabling area, they were approached by numerous well-wishers, fellow competitors, spectators, and rodeo officials alike. The exhibition had clearly touched something in everyone who witnessed it, a reminder of why they had fallen in love with these remarkable animals and this challenging sport in the first place. Amid the congratulations and handshakes, Frank Delgado appeared again, this time with a more formal proposition. "I meant what I said earlier about Stargazer," he told Mason quietly. "But I've been thinking about it more, and I'd like to propose something different. Not a sale, but a partnership. Your horsemanship and my breeding program could be a powerful combination." The offer caught Mason by surprise, representing an opportunity he had never dared to dream about. Before he could formulate a response, however, a rodeo official interrupted with an urgent message. "Mr. Riley, there's someone here who'd like to speak with you right away. Says it's important." Mason exchanged a puzzled glance with Eleanor. The day had already brought enough surprises, and the idea of meeting with yet another unexpected visitor left him feeling slightly overwhelmed. But curiosity won out over fatigue. "Did they say who it was?" he asked the official, while continuing to tend to Thunder. "No, sir, just that it was urgent and personal." The young man shifted uncomfortably. "He's waiting by the east entrance. Well-dressed fellow. Seems important." Mason sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Well, I guess I'd better go see what this is about. Eleanor, would you mind finishing up with Thunder? Make sure he gets extra oats tonight. He's earned them." Eleanor nodded, taking Thunder's reins. "Go on. We'll be fine." As Mason made his way toward the east entrance, his mind raced with possibilities. Perhaps it was another sponsor opportunity. The day's events would certainly have caught the attention of companies looking to associate themselves with the kind of heartwarming story that had unfolded in the arena. Or maybe it was a journalist seeking an exclusive interview. The rodeo circuit had its share of media coverage, especially during national finals. The east entrance was quieter than the main areas of the grounds, with most of the crowd still dispersing from the stands. A solitary figure stood in the shadows cast by the late afternoon sun, a man in an expensive suit that seemed out of place amid the practical Western wear of the rodeo. As Mason approached, the man turned, and a jolt of recognition stopped Mason in his tracks. Victor Harrington, the wealthy businessman who had been Thunder's original owner. Mason hadn't seen Victor in 7 years, not since the livestock auction where he had purchased Thunder. He remembered the man's dismissive attitude that day, the casual way he had consigned a spirited young horse to auction simply because he lacked the patience to work with him properly. "Mr. Riley," Victor said, extending his hand with a confident smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Congratulations on your remarkable performance today." Mason hesitated before shaking the offered hand, his feelings toward this man too complicated for immediate courtesy. "Mr. Harrington, this is a surprise." "I imagine it is." Victor gestured toward a quieter area away from the few people passing by. "Do you have a moment to talk? I have a proposition that might interest you." Curiosity overcoming his reservations, Mason followed Victor to a small seating area adjacent to the concession stands. They sat across from each other at a metal picnic table, the gulf between their worlds evident in everything from their clothing to their posture. "I've been following your career, you know," Victor began, his tone conversational but with an underlying tension. "You and Thunder have come quite a way from that auction pen in Billings." "We've worked hard," Mason replied simply, uncomfortable with the idea that this man had been keeping tabs on them. Victor nodded, drumming his fingers on the table's surface. "Indeed. And today's incident has garnered quite a bit of attention. It's all over social media already. The champion horse who stopped mid-competition to rescue a foal." He smiled thinly. "It makes for a compelling narrative." Mason felt a flicker of irritation at Victor's characterization of what had happened as an incident, as if it had been a calculated publicity stunt rather than a genuine response to an animal in distress. "It wasn't about attention," he said firmly. "Thunder saw something wrong and acted on it. Simple as that." Of course," Victor said, raising his hands in a placating gesture. "I didn't mean to imply otherwise. In fact, it's precisely that authentic quality that makes the story so valuable." The word valuable sent a warning signal through Mason's mind. "What exactly are you getting at, Mr. Harrington?" Victor leaned forward, his expression becoming more focused. "I'm in a different business these days, Mr. Riley. Luxury equestrian experiences for the ultra-wealthy. We provide exclusive riding opportunities, high-end training programs, and exceptional horses for people who can afford the very best." He paused, letting his words hang in the air. "And I want to buy Thunder back." The statement hit Mason like a physical blow. The very idea of selling Thunder was so far from his mind, so contrary to everything their partnership represented, that for a moment he couldn't formulate a response. Victor, interpreting his silence as interest, pressed on. "I'm prepared to make a very generous offer. 7 figures, Mr. Riley. Enough for you to buy a nice ranch, build a proper training facility, maybe even start your own breeding program." Mason found his voice at last. "Thunder's not for sale. Not for any price." Victor's expression hardened slightly, though his smile remained fixed in place. "Everyone has a price, Mr. Riley, even you. Especially when the offer could change your entire future. Think about it. No more living paycheck to paycheck, no more scraping together entry fees, no more wondering if an injury might end your career with nothing to show for it." The assessment was painfully accurate. Despite their success, financial security had always been just beyond Mason's reach. The rodeo circuit was expensive, and even championship purses rarely provided long-term stability. He had dreams of his own place someday, of course, most cowboys did, but the practical path to achieving that dream had always been unclear. "I appreciate the offer," Mason said carefully, "but Thunder is my partner, not my property. I couldn't sell him any more than I could sell a member of my family." Victor sighed, as if Mason's response was both expected and disappointing. "Sentiment is a luxury, Mr. Riley, one that people in your position can rarely afford." He reached into his jacket and withdrew a business card, sliding it across the table. "My offer stands for 48 hours. After what I witnessed today, I'm more convinced than ever that Thunder is exactly what my clients are looking for. A horse with not just talent but heart. That's a rare combination, and one I'm willing to pay premium for." Mason looked down at the card but made no move to take it. "Why did you really sell him in the first place?" he asked, the question that had lingered in his mind for years finally finding voice. He was young, healthy, with bloodlines that most trainers would give anything to work with. A flicker of something, regret, embarrassment, crossed Victor's face. I was impatient, he admitted, and perhaps a bit arrogant. I expected instant results because I'd paid good money for him. When he proved challenging, I saw it as defiance rather than potential. He gestured toward the arena. Clearly, I misjudged him, and you saw what I failed to see. The admission, unexpected in its honesty, didn't change Mason's response. Then you understand why I can't sell him. Not to you, not to anyone. Victor studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. I understand your position, but I also understand that circumstances change. The card has my personal number. Think about it at least. As Victor stood to leave, he added one final comment. By the way, Frank Delgado's offer, the partnership involving Stargazer. I'd be careful there. Frank's operation is heavily leveraged. There are rumors he's one bad season away from bankruptcy. With that parting shot, he walked away, leaving Mason alone with the business card and a head full of troubled thoughts. Mason stared at the card for a long moment before finally picking it up and sliding it into his pocket. Not because he was considering the offer, but because he wanted to remember this moment. This reminder of how differently two people could view the same remarkable animal. The temporary stall assigned to Thunder at the rodeo grounds was modest but comfortable, bedded with fresh shavings and stocked with clean water and hay. Mason sat on an overturned bucket outside the stall, watching as Thunder contentedly munched his evening meal, seemingly untroubled by the day's extraordinary events. The business card from Victor Harrington felt like it was burning a hole in Mason's pocket. He hadn't mentioned the encounter to Eleanor yet, unsure how to process it himself. The amount Victor had hinted at, 7 figures, was life-changing money, the kind that could secure his future in an industry where career-ending injuries were common and retirement plans rare. But as he watched Thunder, peacefully going about his evening routine, the very idea of selling him felt like a betrayal of everything they had built together. This wasn't just any horse. This was the partner who had changed the trajectory of his life, who had shown such extraordinary compassion and intelligence earlier that day. You're awfully quiet. Eleanor's voice broke through his thoughts as she approached, carrying 2 foam cups of coffee. She handed one to Mason before settling on another bucket nearby. Usually you're talking my ear off after a performance, analyzing every transition and spin. Mason accepted the coffee gratefully, wrapping his hands around the warm cup. Just thinking, he replied, unsure how much to share. Eleanor studied him with the perceptive gaze that had made her such an effective coach. This have anything to do with your mysterious visitor? Mason sighed. There was little point in hiding things from Eleanor. She had an uncanny ability to extract information eventually. It was Victor Harrington, he admitted, Thunder's original owner. Eleanor's eyebrows shot up in surprise. After all these years, what did he want? To buy Thunder back. Mason took a sip of coffee, grimacing at both its bitter taste and the conversation. Offered an obscene amount of money. Eleanor was quiet for a moment, processing this information. And, she finally prompted, and nothing. Thunder's not for sale. The firmness in Mason's voice surprised even him. That simple, huh? Eleanor mused, a hint of approval in her tone. Should it be complicated? Mason countered, genuinely curious about her perspective. Eleanor leaned back, considering the question. Money like that could set you up for life in this business. Your own training facility, financial security. Most people would at least think about it. I'm not most people, Mason replied, a touch defensively. No, Eleanor agreed with a small smile. You're not, and that's why you and Thunder work so well together. She nodded toward the horse, who had finished his grain and was now watching them with pricked ears, as if following their conversation. He's not most horses either. They sat in companionable silence for a few minutes, sipping their coffee and watching thunder. The sounds of the rodeo grounds gradually quieted as competitors and spectators departed, leaving behind the peaceful atmosphere of evening settling over the stables. Victor also mentioned something about Frank Delgado, Mason said eventually. Said his operation is in financial trouble, that I should be careful about any partnership. Eleanor frowned. That's interesting timing, him showing up right after Frank makes you an offer. You think he was just trying to undermine Frank's proposal? I think Victor Harrington is a businessman first and foremost, Eleanor replied carefully. And businessmen like him see the world in terms of assets and opportunities. Thunder is valuable to him now in a way he wasn't 7 years ago. He probably doesn't want competition for your attention, or Thunder's future. Mason nodded slowly, processing her insight. So what would you do? About Frank's offer, I mean. Eleanor took her time answering, always thoughtful in her advice. I'd verify Victor's claims first of all. The rodeo community is small. It wouldn't be hard to find out if Frank's operation is really struggling, and then I'd consider what you really want, Mason. Not just for yourself, but for Thunder. As if recognizing that they were discussing his fate, Thunder nickered softly and stretched his neck over the stall door, nudging Mason's shoulder. Mason reached up automatically to stroke the horse's face, feeling the soft muzzle against his palm. What I want, Mason said quietly, more to Thunder than to Eleanor, is to do right by him. After what he did today, he deserves that much. Eleanor stood, collecting their empty coffee cups. Then that's your answer. Figure out what's best for Thunder, and the rest will follow. She paused, then added with uncharacteristic sentimentality, for what it's worth, I think he's pretty happy right where he is. After Eleanor left, Mason remained outside Thunder's stall, lost in thought as darkness fell completely over the rodeo grounds. The events of the day kept replaying in his mind. Thunder stopping mid-routine, the rescue of the foal, the extraordinary exhibition performance, Victor's unexpected appearance and offer. Eventually, Mason rose and entered Thunder's stall, wanting a moment of quiet connection away from the eyes of others. The horse shifted to make room for him in the confined space, a familiar dance they had performed countless times in stalls across the country. What a day, huh? Mason murmured, running his hands along Thunder's neck and withers, checking for any signs of tension or soreness from the day's exertions. You've got everyone talking, that's for sure. Thunder leaned slightly into Mason's touch, eyes half closed in contentment. These quiet moments after competitions had become a ritual for them, a time to decompress and reconnect outside the pressures of performance. Victor wants to buy you back, Mason continued, finding it easier to speak his thoughts aloud to Thunder than to another person. Offered enough money to set us up for life. He paused in his grooming, resting his forehead against Thunder's warm shoulder. But he doesn't understand what we have, does he? Thinks everything has a price tag. Thunder shifted, turning his head to gently bump Mason's chest with his nose, as if offering reassurance. Then there's Frank and his partnership idea. Mason resumed his methodical grooming, the familiar motions soothing to both of them. Chance to work with Stargazer, maybe establish something more permanent than living competition to competition. He smiled faintly. You seem to take a shine to that little guy. Maybe you've got hidden talents as a babysitter. As he talked through the options, Mason realized that what he truly wanted wasn't captured in either Victor's offer or Frank's proposal. It wasn't about money or business opportunities. It was about preserving and honoring the remarkable partnership he had with Thunder, about finding a path forward that would allow that bond to continue flourishing. The sound of approaching footsteps interrupted his reflections. Mason turned to see a young woman in a rodeo staff jacket standing hesitantly by the stall door. "Sorry to bother you, Mr. Riley," she said, "but there's a call for you at the office. The gentleman said it's important, something about an opportunity that can't wait until morning." Mason frowned, wondering if Victor was pressing his case despite the clear rejection earlier. "Did they give a name?" The woman shook her head. "No, sir. Just said you'd want to take the call." Mason gave Thunder a final pat. "I'll be right back, boy. Don't go solving any more crises while I'm gone." The horse nickered softly as Mason followed the staff member toward the rodeo office, unaware that the call waiting for him would present yet another unexpected turn in an already extraordinary day. The rodeo office was a small, functional space with fluorescent lighting that buzzed faintly overhead and walls covered in schedules, rule books, and faded photographs of legendary competitors from years past. A desktop phone sat on the cluttered main desk, its hold button blinking insistently. "Line 2, the young woman informed Mason before discreetly stepping outside to give him privacy. Mason picked up the receiver, curious and slightly wary. "This is Mason Riley." "Mr. Riley," came a warm female voice with a slight southern accent. "My name is Dr. Sarah Mackenzie. I'm the director of the Equine Behavioral Research Program at Wesleyan University. I hope you don't mind the late call, but after what I witnessed today, I simply couldn't wait to speak with you." Mason's wariness gave way to surprise. Wesleyan University housed one of the most prestigious equine science programs in the country, known for groundbreaking research in horse behavior and cognition. "No, that's fine. What can I do for you, Dr. Mackenzie?" "First, let me say that what your horse did today was extraordinary," she continued, enthusiasm evident in her voice. "I was in the audience with several of my graduate students, observing the competition as part of our field studies. We've been researching empathetic responses in horses, specifically their ability to recognize distress in other animals and respond appropriately. Thunder's behavior was a textbook example of what we've been documenting, but at a level of complexity we rarely see outside of controlled environments." Mason felt a surge of pride at her professional assessment of Thunder's actions. "He's always been special, but today surprised even me." "That's precisely why I'm calling," Dr. Mackenzie explained. "Our program has received a significant grant to expand our research into practical applications of equine empathy, particularly in therapeutic settings. We're looking at how horses with exceptional emotional intelligence might be utilized in programs for at-risk youth, trauma survivors, and people with disabilities." Mason listened intently, beginning to see where the conversation might be heading, but allowing Dr. Mackenzie to continue. "We're assembling a small group of horses with demonstrated empathetic capabilities to participate in a 6-month pilot program. Based on what I observed today, Thunder would be an ideal candidate. Of course, this would be a paid position for both of you. We recognize the value of your time and expertise, as well as Thunder's unique abilities." The proposal caught Mason completely off guard. After Victor's offer to buy Thunder and Frank's partnership proposal, this third option seemed to come from an entirely different direction. "What exactly would this involve?" Mason asked, trying to wrap his head around the concept. "You and Thunder would relocate to our facility in Colorado for the duration of the program," Dr. Mackenzie explained. "Thunder would participate in supervised interaction sessions with various groups, while our researchers document his responses and behaviors. You'd be closely involved every step of the way. No one knows Thunder better than you do, and your insights would be invaluable to our research." "And the end goal of all this?" Mason pressed, wanting to understand the bigger picture. "Ultimately, we hope to develop better methods for identifying and training therapy horses, as well as creating more effective equine-assisted therapy protocols. The potential impact is enormous, from helping veterans with PTSD, to children with autism, to survivors of abuse. Horses like Thunder, with natural empathetic abilities, could help us understand how to better utilize these remarkable animals in healing contexts." The idea was compelling, presenting a purpose for Thunder's unique qualities that Mason had never considered. Unlike Victor's offer, which sought to capitalize on Thunder's abilities as a status symbol, or Frank's proposal focused on breeding, Dr. Mackenzie was suggesting something that honored the very quality that had made today's event so extraordinary: Thunder's compassion. "I'd need some time to think about this," Mason said finally. "It's a big change from the competition circuit." "Of course," Dr. Mackenzie replied warmly. "I'd be happy to send you detailed information about the program, the facility, and the compensation package, and perhaps you could visit us before making a decision, see the setup firsthand." "That would be helpful," Mason agreed. "And I'd need to discuss this with my coach as well." "Absolutely. Eleanor Winters, isn't it? I've followed her career for years. Her approach to training has always impressed me." There was a pause. Then Dr. Mackenzie added more personally, "Mr. Riley, I understand this is an unexpected proposal, especially coming on the heels of today's excitement. But I want you to know that our program is dedicated to the welfare and dignity of the horses involved. Thunder would be treated with the utmost respect and care." The sincerity in her voice was reassuring. "I appreciate that, Dr. Mackenzie, and I'm genuinely interested in learning more." They arranged for information to be sent to Mason's email and tentatively scheduled a visit to the university in 2 weeks' time, after the conclusion of the rodeo season. As Mason hung up the phone, his mind was racing with possibilities that hadn't existed just hours earlier. He stepped outside the office to find Eleanor waiting for him, concern evident on her face. "Everything all right? You've been in there a while." Mason nodded, still processing the conversation. It wasn't Victor. It was a researcher from Westland University, Dr. Sarah Mackenzie. Eleanor's eyebrows shot up in recognition. The behaviorist? What did she want? As they walked back toward Thunder's stall, Mason explained Dr. Mackenzie's proposal. Eleanor listened without interrupting, her expression thoughtful. "A research study," she mused when he had finished. "That's different." "What do you think?" Mason asked, valuing her perspective more than ever amidst the swirl of options suddenly before him. Eleanor took her time responding, considering the question with her characteristic thoroughness. "It's not the path I would have predicted for you two," she admitted, "but then again, Thunder has been defying expectations since the day you found him." They reached Thunder's stall to find the horse standing alert, as if sensing the importance of their conversation. He nickered softly as they approached, reaching his nose over the door toward Mason. "The money's good?" Eleanor asked practically. "Very good. Not Victor Harrington good, but enough to live comfortably and put some aside for the future." Eleanor nodded. "And what would happen after the 6 months?" "That's part of what I need to find out," Mason replied. "Could be a one-time thing, or could lead to other opportunities. Dr. Mackenzie mentioned the possibility of Thunder becoming a permanent part of their program if things work out." Thunder nudged Mason's shoulder insistently, demanding attention. Mason obliged, scratching the spot behind his ears that always made the horse lean into his touch like an oversized cat. "3 offers in one day," Eleanor remarked with a wry smile. "You two are suddenly very popular." "Makes a person suspicious, doesn't it?" Mason replied, only half joking. Eleanor's expression turned serious. "Maybe, maybe not. But here's what I know for certain. What Thunder did today wasn't a fluke or a coincidence. It was a glimpse of something special in him. Something that's always been there, but that most people, including me, probably underestimated." She gestured toward the horse. "A creature with that kind of heart deserves a future that honors it. The question is, which of these paths does that?" It was the same conclusion Mason had been circling around all evening, but hearing Eleanor articulate it so clearly brought the central question into sharper focus. What future would truly honor Thunder's remarkable spirit? The luxury of Victor's world? The breeding potential of Frank's offer? Or the healing work proposed by Dr. Mackenzie? As Mason considered the crossroads before them, Thunder remained calm and present, seemingly content to let his human partner wrestle with these weighty decisions. The bond between them had been forged through years of mutual trust and respect, and whatever path they chose, Mason knew it would be one they would walk together. Morning arrived with the soft golden light of dawn filtering through the stable windows. Mason had spent a restless night on a cot near Thunder's stall, his mind too full of competing thoughts to allow for deep sleep. The three offers before him represented such different futures that attempting to compare them directly felt impossible. Each had its merits, its drawbacks, and its uncertainties. He rose early, before most of the rodeo grounds had stirred to life, and saddled Thunder for a quiet morning ride. They both needed the space and clarity that came from movement, from the rhythmic partnership of horse and rider away from the pressures of competition and decision-making. They rode beyond the rodeo grounds to a nearby meadow, where the morning dew still clung to the grass and wildflowers nodded in the gentle breeze. Mason gave Thunder his head, allowing the horse to set their pace and direction. There was freedom in this simple act of trust, a reminder of the foundation their relationship was built upon. After a while, Mason guided Thunder to a stop near a small stream that cut through the meadow. He dismounted, loosened the cinch to make Thunder more comfortable, and allowed him to drink and graze while Mason perched on a sun-warmed rock, watching the light change as the sun climbed higher in the sky. "What do you think, boy?" Mason asked, not expecting an answer, but finding comfort in voicing his thoughts aloud. "Victor offers money and luxury, Frank offers legacy through Stargazer, and Dr. Mackenzie offers purpose through helping others." He sighed, plucking a piece of grass and twirling it between his fingers. "Three paths I never saw coming." Thunder raised his head from grazing, ears pricked toward Mason as if truly listening. There was something so present, so aware in those dark eyes that Mason sometimes forgot he was communing with a horse rather than a human companion. "The thing is," Mason continued, "none of these decisions are really just about me. They're about us, you and me. And after yesterday..." He trailed off, remembering the moment when Thunder had stopped, sensing something was wrong long before any human noticed. "After yesterday, I'm more convinced than ever that you understand a whole lot more than people give horses credit for." Thunder nickered softly, then returned to grazing, moving slightly closer to where Mason sat. The simple action, seeking proximity while maintaining his own agenda, struck Mason as quintessentially Thunder, independent yet connected, strong-willed yet responsive. As they sat in companionable silence, Mason's thoughts drifted to his history with Thunder. The auction where he'd spent his savings on a horse others saw as problematic. The early days of their partnership, filled with challenges and small breakthroughs. The gradual building of trust and communication that had led to their success in competition. And now, this unexpected juncture, where Thunder's extraordinary qualities had opened doors neither of them could have anticipated. The sound of approaching hoofbeats interrupted his reverie. Mason turned to see Frank Delgado riding toward them, leading a second horse, a graceful bay mare with the unmistakable swollen udder of a nursing mother. Midnight Star with her distinctive white marking on her forehead. "Thought I might find you out here," Frank called as he approached. "Hope you don't mind the company." Mason stood, genuinely pleased to see the stock contractor. "Not at all. What brings you out so early?" Frank dismounted with the easy grace of a lifelong horseman. "Wanted to check on Star here, make sure yesterday's excitement didn't stress her too much." He patted the mare's neck affectionately. "And I thought you might like to see how the little guy is doing." "Stargazer's with you?" Mason asked, looking around in confusion. Frank grinned and gestured back toward the rodeo grounds. He's in the small pen just beyond that rise. Thought it best not to ride too close to your horse in case it stirred up memories from yesterday. But if you're amenable, we could walk over. Star needs to nurse him anyway." Mason nodded, intrigued by the opportunity to see the foal again under calmer circumstances. He gathered Thunder's reins and followed Frank and Midnight Star across the meadow. Thunder showed immediate interest, ears forward and stride energetic as they approached the temporary pen where Stargazer waited. The foal had been dozing in the morning sun, but came alert at the sound of his mother's approach. He scrambled to his feet with the endearing awkwardness of the very young, his legs still seeming too long for his body. When he caught sight of Thunder, however, Stargazer's reaction was unexpected. Rather than focusing solely on his mother, the foal approached the fence nearest to Thunder, neck stretched in curiosity. "Well, would you look at that?" Frank said softly, observing the interaction with keen interest. "Seems he remembers his rescuer." Thunder lowered his head over the fence, nostrils flaring as he took in the foal's scent. Stargazer, showing remarkable boldness for his age, stretched his muzzle to touch Thunder's. The gentle contact lasted only a moment before Stargazer whirled around with sudden kitten-like energy and dashed to his mother's side for his delayed breakfast. As Midnight Star patiently allowed her foal to nurse, Frank turned to Mason with a thoughtful expression. "I heard about Victor's offer," he said without preamble. "Word travels fast in rodeo circles." Mason wasn't entirely surprised. The rodeo community was indeed small and interconnected. "News to me that you and Victor have history," he replied, curious about the relationship between the two men. Frank's weathered face tightened slightly. "Let's just say we have different philosophies about horses and life." He paused, watching Stargazer nurse. "What he told you about my operation being in trouble? There's some truth to it. Been a tough few years, but we're turning a corner now, and Midnight Star's bloodline is a big part of that future." "Why tell me this?" Mason asked. "Most businessmen wouldn't admit vulnerability to a potential partner." "Because I want you to make a decision based on truth, not Victor's manipulations," Frank replied simply. "And because after what your horse did for my foal, you deserve honesty at the very least." They stood in companionable silence for a while, watching the interactions between the horses. Stargazer, having finished nursing, was once again approaching the fence near Thunder, drawn by some inexplicable curiosity or connection. "He's never this interested in other horses," Frank observed with wonder. "Usually sticks to his mama like glue." Mason watched as Thunder again lowered his head to the foal's level, displaying a gentleness that belied his size and strength. There was something profoundly moving about seeing this powerful animal, capable of such athletic precision in the show ring, demonstrating such careful awareness of his own impact on a more vulnerable creature. "I also heard about the university offer," Frank said eventually. "Sounds like you've got 3 very different paths to consider." Mason nodded, his eyes still on the horses. "I've been turning them over all night, trying to figure out which one makes the most sense." Frank chuckled softly. "In my experience, the best decisions rarely come from just making sense." He gestured toward Thunder and Stargazer. "Look at them. That connection doesn't make logical sense, but it's real all the same. Sometimes you've got to listen to what your heart knows before your head has figured it out." As Frank's words settled over him, Mason felt something shift inside. Not a decision exactly, but a clarity about how that decision would eventually be made. He had been approaching the problem as if it were a competition strategy, weighing pros and cons, calculating potential outcomes. But perhaps the answer lay in a simpler question: which path honored the truth of who Thunder was and who they were together? 6 months later, the Colorado morning greeted Mason with a crisp, pine-scented breeze as he made his way across the university grounds toward the Equine Research Center. The facility sat nestled against the foothills of the Rocky Mountains, its modern architecture blending harmoniously with the natural landscape. For Mason, who had grown up amid the vast prairies of Montana, the mountain backdrop still took his breath away, even after months of waking to its majesty. He entered the spacious barn, breathing in the familiar, comforting scents of hay, horses, and leather. Several graduate students greeted him with warm smiles and respectful nods as he passed. In the short time since joining Dr. Mackenzie's program, Mason and Thunder had become beloved fixtures at the research center. Thunder's stall was at the end of the central aisle, larger than standard size, with a private paddock attached that allowed him to move freely between indoor and outdoor spaces. As Mason approached, Thunder's head appeared in the doorway, ears pricked forward in greeting. "Morning, buddy," Mason said, reaching out to stroke the horse's forehead. "Ready for a big day?" Thunder nickered softly, pressing his head against Mason's chest in their customary greeting. Despite the significant changes in their lives since the fateful rodeo finals, this connection remained constant, a touchstone of trust and understanding that had only deepened during their work at the university. Dr. Mackenzie had been true to her word. The research program provided Thunder with stimulating, meaningful work, while treating him with the dignity and respect he deserved. Mason had worried initially that Thunder might miss the excitement of competition, but those concerns had quickly faded. The horse seemed to thrive in his new role, displaying an intuitive understanding of the various individuals, from traumatized veterans to anxious children, who came to work with him. "He's a natural," Dr. Mackenzie had remarked early in their tenure. "It's as if he can read emotional states better than some of our trained therapists. And the way he adjusts his behavior to match each person's needs, it's remarkable." For Mason, watching Thunder's innate empathy unfold in a structured therapeutic environment had been profoundly moving. The qualities that had made Thunder stop mid-competition to help a frightened foal were now being channeled into helping humans heal from their own traumas and challenges. There was a rightness to it that Mason felt in his bones. As he prepared Thunder for the day ahead, Mason reflected on the path that had led them here. After that morning conversation with Frank Delgado, watching Thunder's gentle interaction with Stargazer, something had clicked into place. The decision, which had seemed so complicated when viewed through the lens of financial considerations or career strategy, suddenly became clear when Mason focused on Thunder's true nature. Victor's offer of wealth and luxury had been the easiest to decline. The man's view of Thunder as a valuable commodity rather than a sentient being with his own worth made the decision straightforward, despite the life-changing sum offered. Frank's proposal had been more tempting. The connection between Thunder and Stargazer had been genuine, and the idea of building something lasting through a breeding partnership had its appeal. In the end, though, Mason had realized that such a path would prioritize Thunder's genetics over his remarkable empathetic abilities, the very quality that made him truly special. Dr. Mackenzie's program, by contrast, centered precisely on those qualities. Here, Thunder wasn't valued merely for his physical capabilities or breeding potential, but for the depth of his emotional intelligence and his ability to connect with vulnerable beings, human and equine alike. The choice, once framed this way, had been surprisingly easy to make. Mason led Thunder from his stall toward the main therapy arena, where today's session would take place. As they walked, a familiar figure appeared at the entrance to the barn, Frank Delgado, his weathered face breaking into a warm smile at the sight of them. "Right on time," Frank called, striding forward to meet them. The little guys all settled in the round pen, excited as can be. Mason grinned, genuinely pleased to see the stock contractor. "How was the drive up from Texas?" "Long, but worth it," Frank replied, falling into step beside them. Star was a perfect lady the whole way, and the colt barely made a fuss. The mention of Stargazer, no longer quite a foal at nearly a year old, brought a smile to Mason's face. Though he had declined Frank's formal partnership offer, they had maintained a friendly relationship, with Frank occasionally bringing Midnight Star and Stargazer to participate in special research sessions studying equine familial bonds and how they might be applied to therapeutic settings. These visits served multiple purposes. They provided valuable data for Dr. Mackenzie's research. They allowed Frank to showcase his breeding stock to potential clients in the therapeutic riding community, and, perhaps most importantly, they nurtured the unusual bond that had formed between Thunder and Stargazer. As they approached the round pen adjacent to the main arena, Mason could see Midnight Star and Stargazer already inside, the young colt prancing about with the endless energy of youth, while his mother watched with the equine equivalent of maternal tolerance. At the sight of Thunder, Stargazer immediately trotted to the fence, neck stretched in eager greeting. Thunder's reaction was equally enthusiastic, his pace quickening as they drew near. "Would you look at that?" Frank marveled, not for the first time. "Still recognizes him after all these months. Smart little fellow." Dr. Mackenzie emerged from her office nearby, clipboard in hand and a broad smile on her face. "Perfect timing, gentlemen. Our participants will be arriving in about 20 minutes. She nodded toward the reuniting horses. "Let's give them a few minutes to reacquaint before we begin." Mason released Thunder into the round pen, watching as the horse approached Stargazer with the same gentle care he had shown during their first encounter. The young colt, now much steadier on his legs but still dwarfed by Thunder's size, pranced around his older friend with obvious delight. "The data we're gathering from these interactions is fascinating," Dr. Mackenzie remarked, observing the horses with a researcher's keen eye. "The way Thunder seems to remember Stargazer and how their relationship has evolved despite limited contact, it challenges some of our assumptions about equine memory and social bonds. For Mason, however, the significance went beyond scientific data points. Watching Thunder with Stargazer reminded him of the moment that had changed everything, that split second when Thunder had recognized something more important than competition ribbons or prize money. Today's session would involve several children from a local trauma recovery program who would observe and eventually interact with both the mature horses and the energetic young colt. Dr. Mackenzie's research had shown that watching healthy horse interactions often help traumatized children begin to rebuild their own capacity for trust and attachment. As Mason watched Thunder gently guide Stargazer around the pen, creating a space of safety and play for the young horse, he felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over him. The path they had chosen wasn't the wealthiest or the most conventional, but it was unquestionably the right one. "You know," Frank said quietly, as if reading Mason's thoughts, "some horses are born to run fast, some to jump high, and some—" He nodded toward Thunder, now standing protectively as Stargazer explored the perimeter of the pen. "Some are born to heal." Mason nodded, unable to find words adequate to express his agreement. In the end, their decision hadn't been about money or prestige or even personal fulfillment. It had been about honoring the truth that Thunder had revealed in the middle of that rodeo arena, that sometimes stopping to help another is the most important victory of all.